How to simplify surds. First of all, what are surds? Surds are things with square roots over them that you can't really square root to a certain extent. So the square root of 4 is 2, so it's not really much of a surd, if you see what I mean. Whereas the square root of 2, you can't work out to a nice easy number here. So before we get into how we do the simplifying, we need to look at some of the basic rules that we need to use with surds. So the first of these rules that you can see here is that if we multiply one by another, then that equals the same as the square root of multiplying together the two numbers inside, and that's going to be very useful in a minute. This is a variation on the same thing basically, but if you've got the square root of one divided by the square root of the other, then it's also true that that equals the same as the square root of the number inside here divided by the number here. And then a very useful one to just keep in your head is if you multiply 1 by itself, in other words you're squaring, so you're undoing the square rooting, and it means that you get what's inside each time. So the square root of 2 times the square root of 2 would equal 2 in this case. So now we're going to look at how we can use this to help us with simplifying surds. So what do we mean by simplifying them? We're not going to get rid of them, but just like with fractions, we don't get rid of those when we simplify them, but the numbers inside the square root is going to be smaller. One of the things that you need to be confident with is knowing your square numbers. So it can often help to actually write them out so you've got them in front of you. So we've got 1 squared, 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared, 5 squared, 6 squared, 7 squared, 8 squared, 9 squared, and 10 squared. It's not very common that you have to go beyond those, and obviously it's not very often that we use these ends here. So how are we going to make this simpler? We're going to do it using this rule that we introduced at the top here, but backwards. So I want you to picture this 75 as being the answer to multiplying these two together. And what we need to do is we need to find one of those numbers as a square number. So hopefully you can see that the square number that works with this, the biggest square number that works with this, is 25. So I can write this as being 75 is the same as 25 times 3. So now we've got something that looks like this, one number times another. So this rule here says that that would also be the same as the square root of 25 on its own times by the square root of 3. Now, the square root of 25 is 5, and the square root of 3 stays like that. And just like you would do with algebra, we don't write the times sign in between them. So we just write them next to each other, a bit like that. So we've got 5 root 3 as our simplified version. So let me do a couple more examples and show how it might come up in a question as well. So here we've got 32. So again, we're thinking about that list of square numbers, and we need to find the biggest square number that we can. Okay, otherwise you'll have to do the process more than once, like sometimes you do with simplifying fractions. So 16 divides into 32, and that's the biggest square number we can get. So I can write this as being 16 times 2, and if we split those out, we get the square root of 16 times the square root of 2, and the square root of 16 is 4, so our answer is 4 root 2. Okay, so now we're going to do 18. So the biggest square number that divides into 18 is 9. So we can make this 9 times 2. We can split that out like this, and the square root of 9 is 3, so we've got 3 root 2. So I'm going to use those two that we've simplified already to show you a couple of typical examples of questions that they might give you. So here we have an adding sum here with surds in it. Okay, so what you need to do is simplify these two first of all. So we've already done that. So I can replace the 32, the root 32, by 4 root 2, sorry, and the root 18 by 3 root 2. And now we can further simplify and add this together, just like you would if that was an x or an in algebra. So I've got 3 of those and 3 of those here and 4 of those here, so altogether I've got 7 root 2. Okay, just one more situation or version on that. So same thing again, we need to write them in their simplified version. So that's the one on top. This one is going to go on the bottom. And then, just like with normal sort of fractions, we can cancel. So this is 4 times that and 3 times that. So they both have that root 2, so we can cancel that top and bottom. So that means we're left with just 4 over 3, which if we turn into a mixed number is 1 and 1/3. So that's how we simplify surds.